in 2011. And that also helped shore up official reserves for the central bank.
In 2011, efforts by the Central Bank of the Gambia to exercise restraint in expenditure paid off, as domestic borrowing was curbed and the international reserve enough for 5 months of imports. But just before the year ended, another problem came knocking. It was the crop failure. The phenomenon presented shocks to the economy which needs to be cushioned, something the IMF country representative said is only possible when there is a swift and effective response.
We expect that with a recovery in agriculture spread over the next 2 to 3 years, real GDP will rebound significantly, and we expect a GDP growth around 8 to 10% a year during 2012-2013. But this is given strong provisos. This is, it will depend on effective response to the drought.
Assessing the risks to the country's economy, Mr. Chirongo cited the weakness in the global economy, particularly in Europe, as well as domestic borrowing. The new 3-year arrangement seeks to achieve a number of milestones in fiscal policy, aims to rebuild the revenue base and restore buoyancy to the tax system, reduce fuel subsidies, conduct studies for further tax reform, maintain cash budgeting in 2012 while improving budget processes and transparency over the medium term, maintain low inflation, strengthen financial stability while not losing sight of the page strategic document. The briefing was characterized by a question and answer session during which journalists sought answers on matters, especially as to how they relate to the needs of the ordinary Gambian. The emphasis at the briefing has been on the need to reduce domestic borrowing, broaden the tax base, manage properly the crop failure, minimize and gradually eliminate fuel subsidies. These, it is believed, will help create enough saving for the financing of the page strategic document. Modulamin Sise, Grts News.
Repatriated to their homeland. The exercise was spearheaded by the Gambia Refugee Commission and supervised by the UNHCR Gambia office, Abokat Dabo reports.
Sadness. These refugees of Liberian descent are finally returning home after spending more than a decade in the smiling coast of Africa. Most of them arrived in the Gambia right at the beginning of the Liberian civil unrest and have since made families and friends for themselves in the Gambia. But as the UNHCR refugee legality status for Liberians expired June 30th, most Liberian refugees in the country believe it's time now to go back home. Their repatriation is facilitated under the supervision of the UNHCR Banjul office.
We have several Liberian refugees. Right now it was about 701 refugees. But with the voluntary repatriation, it has reduced to 300 and something, and that they are still moving. So that being the case, we are very thankful to the government of the Gambia for hosting these refugees for over a decade now.
The repatriation, which is conducted in line with United Nations and African Union conventions on the rights of refugees, is made a voluntary undertaking for Liberians willing to return home with the hope of contributing to the reconstruction process of the former war-torn country.
Today is another day which we had, a special flight that is going to depart from the Gambia to Monrovia in order to facilitate their transportation.
For the chairman of the Governing Council of the Gambia Refugee Commission, Mamadou Nai Sise, the Gambia has always been a safe haven for people from troubled African countries by virtue of the unmatched opportunities it offers in terms of prospects and humanity.
The reason why they came in here are of few issues. One, the peace, stability in the Gambia, coexistence between Gambians and non-Gambians, and then the economic prosperity that is available.
Cisse dilated on the conducive environment created by government for every bona fide African citizen, saying that his commission has endeavored to ensure that all rights regarding refugees are given their due respect. Representing the Immigration Director General, ASP Ensa Jawara hailed the Gambian people for their openness and cooperation with non-Gambian citizens, saying that his office has done enough to ensure that Liberians stay harmoniously in the country.
The Liberian refugees are living in the Gambia more than a decade, and
Jawara implored the repatriated Liberians to contribute meaningfully to the rebuilding of their country and be true to the ideals of a developed Africa. Most of those we spoke to expressed satisfaction with the harmonious coexistence they enjoyed with the people of the Gambia, adding that the Gambia will forever remain their second home. A senior program officer from the Liberian Refugee Repatriation and Resettlement Commission, who was in Banjul to help coordinate the smooth resettlement of Liberians, was very positive about the treatment received by his kinsmen during their stay in the Gambia, thanking government for taking good custody of its citizens. This batch of 131 refugees made up the fifth and largest batch of Liberian refugees repatriated to Liberia on a large scale. Even though some 300 or so remain in the country, the status of those who wish to stay will have to be revisited after the UNHCR evoked the cessation of their refugee status, after which they will be mandated to settle on equal level with other ECOWAS citizens. Abu Bakr Dabo, GRTS.
4 individuals suspected of dealing in illicit drugs are in the custody of counter-narcotic operatives. The arrests were made in different areas within the West Coast region. Modu Jallo was at the NDA briefing and he reports one of the suspects is physically challenged.
These 4 men were arrested at different times and places within the West Coast region for allegedly being in possession of prohibited substances for the purpose of trafficking. One of them is Sehtijan Sow of Brikama, who is physically disabled. He was arrested by anti-narcotics operatives following a tip-off that he was engaged in the trafficking of hashish concealed in his crotches.
A thorough search was conducted on him, during which surprisingly 40 stones of hashish were discovered in his crotch sticks. The accused is a cripple, and these 40 stones were concealed in 2 of the sticks, each 20 stones, totaling it to 40. He was immediately arrested and taken to Birkama police station.
This is the largest seizure of hashish ever made by the National Drug Enforcement Agency, and according to the agency's public relations officer, it highlights the different tactics drug peddlers adopt in order to enable them advance their trade.
Going by our statistics, to arrest this number of hashish from one individual is very rare. I cannot recall when, because 40 stones from one person, no, because many a times I remember many a times where the annual statistics, annual seizure of hashish even does not reach 40 stones. So having seized 40 stones from him definitely is a very great concern for the agency.
He's now charged with possession and trafficking of drugs, which could see him spend 10 years in prison if convicted. Despite this, Sow has refused to cooperate with investigators as they try to know his suppliers and intended recipients. Sankun Jaite of Brikama was also arrested in Tumani Tenda in the early hours after he was spotted by 2 young boys resting in the outskirts of the village.
The accused was said to be coming from the Casamance with his pedal bicycle, and on arrival at Tumani Tenda, he decided to have a rest and later proceed to his journey. Unfortunately, where he was relaxing under a tree, was spotted by 2 young boys who went and reported it to the villagers that they have seen a strange person at the outskirts of the village.
He was later arrested by the villagers who handed him to the Maninaba police. Meanwhile, Lamin Sedikan of Welingara village, Common North, was nabbed by operatives after a raid on his home, where these 14 bundles of suspected cannabis were recovered. Sedikan is said to be a notorious cannabis peddler who was arrested for a similar offense before he jumped bail.
He has been long since being monitored by our officers, and since he was granted bail, we got a tip-off that he was involved in this business, and on the 3rd of June, it has proven that, because he was arrested immediately when he came from Casamance to collect his consignment of cannabis.
Basiru Manga, on the other hand, was arrested at the Bullock checkpoint after officers stopped and searched his bag and found these 2 bundles of what is believed to be cannabis. Manga, like the others before him, is now in police custody, awaiting his appearance before a court of law. The arrest of these 4 individuals, all from the West Coast region, follows a relative lull in drug-related arrests. For the National Drug Enforcement Agency,